What if I told you that the history of Haiti is far darker, more complex, and more shocking than what you learned in school? A nation born out of revolution, forged by fire, and scarred by betrayal. Beneath the surface of paradise lies a story of power struggles, bloodshed, and unbreakable resistance. This is not just history. It is the tale of how a nation's destiny was written in both triumph and tragedy. Haiti's origins are unlike any other country in the world. It's the first independent Black republic, a symbol of hope for enslaved people across the globe, yet also one of the most politically unstable nations in modern history. The same revolution that freed its people also unleashed decades of chaos, foreign intervention, and internal strife. Presidents rose and fell, often in violent ends, while ordinary citizens bore the weight of corruption and oppression. The world remembers Haiti for its resilience, but very few know the real story behind the headlines, the betrayals, the assassinations, the hidden hands that shaped its fate. This is where myths end and cold truth begins. In this episode, we will go back to the beginning, to the colonial days when Haiti was the jewel of the Caribbean, to the brutal conditions that sparked one of the most successful slave revolts in history, and to the political games that have kept the nation in a cycle of instability for more than 2 centuries. By the end, you will understand Haiti not just as a country, but as a symbol of what happens when freedom is won, but peace is never given. In the shadow of the Caribbean's turquoise waters and sunlit shores lies a story drenched in blood, betrayal, and resilience. Haiti's history is not just a timeline, it is a haunting tapestry of revolutions, foreign invasions, and political assassinations that have shaped a nation's identity and destiny. The origins of Haiti are not the romanticized tales found in tourist brochures. They are a saga of pain and triumph that the world has tried, time and again, to ignore. This is a nation born from fire, the only successful slave revolution in human history, where the oppressed rose against the most powerful empire of the time. But that victory came at a cost. From the moment Haiti declared its independence in 1804, it became a target for political sabotage, economic strangulation, and a cycle of internal unrest that has continued for over 2 centuries. The conflict at the heart of Haiti's story is simple yet devastating. A fight for freedom that led to a legacy of isolation, poverty, and instability. Colonial powers feared Haiti's example, imposing crippling debts and sanctions, while within its own borders, political corruption and foreign interference fanned the flames of chaos. Presidents rose to power, only to fall in bloody coups. Leaders promised unity, only to be swallowed by the same cycles of violence they sought to end. In this documentary, we will peel back the layers of Haiti's dark past, uncovering the brutal truth about its origins, the assassinations that changed its course, and the deep scars left behind by centuries of exploitation. This is not the story you learned in school. This is the unfiltered, unflinching truth of how a small island dared to defy the world, and the world never forgave it. The origins of Haiti trace back to the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492, when the island, then known as Hispaniola, was claimed by Spain. The indigenous Taino people, who had lived here for centuries, were quickly decimated by disease, forced labor, and violence. Within just a few decades, nearly the entire native population had vanished. What was left behind was an island ripe for European exploitation. By the 17th century, France had seized control of the western part of the island, calling it Saint-Domingue. This colony would soon become the jewel of France's overseas empire, producing staggering amounts of sugar, coffee, and indigo. But this wealth came at an unimaginable human cost. Hundreds of thousands of Africans were forcibly shipped across the Atlantic, enduring the brutal Middle Passage, only to be worked to death in the plantations. The mortality rate was so high that plantation owners constantly needed fresh shipments of enslaved labor just to keep their operations running. The brutality of this system created a society fueled by fear, violence, and oppression. Enslaved people were treated as expendable property, their lives worth less than the tools they worked with. Punishments for rebellion were unimaginably cruel burnings, mutilations, executions, all designed to crush any thought of resistance. But in the shadows, resentment burned hotter than the tropical sun. By the late 18th century, whispers of revolution began to spread, carried by news from abroad. The American Revolution had shown that colonies could break free from European powers. The French Revolution promised liberty, equality, and fraternity, at least in theory. But in Saint-Domingue, those words rang hollow. The enslaved population knew that freedom was being spoken of in France, yet they remained chained. The contradiction was too great to ignore. In 1791, the spark finally ignited. A massive slave uprising erupted in the northern plains, led by figures whose names would become legends: Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and Henri Christophe. What began as a desperate fight for survival quickly grew into the largest and most successful slave revolt in history. The colonists were stunned. European powers sent armies to crush the rebellion, but the rebels fought with ferocity and strategy, defeating Spain, Britain, and even Napoleon's forces. By 1804, against all odds, Haiti declared its independence, the first black republic in the world and the first nation born from a successful slave revolt. It was a moment that terrified slave-owning societies across the Americas and inspired oppressed peoples everywhere. But the world's reaction to Haiti's freedom was not celebration, it was fear and isolation. Global powers refused to recognize Haiti, crippling its economy through embargoes and trade restrictions. France demanded a staggering independence debt, forcing Haiti to pay the equivalent of billions in today's money, under threat of invasion. This debt would haunt the nation for more than a century, draining its resources and ensuring its people remained trapped in poverty. Yet, Haiti's struggle was not just economic, it was political. The young nation was plagued by internal power struggles, coups, and assassinations. Leaders who rose to power often met violent ends, their dreams of unity shattered by rival factions and foreign interference. And this is where Haiti's dark past deepens a story of betrayals, conspiracies, and bloodshed that shaped the country's destiny. In the next chapter, we will uncover the political chaos that followed independence and how it set the stage for a cycle of violence that would continue for centuries. We need to go back even further, beyond the revolutions and wars, to a time when Haiti wasn't even called Haiti. This land was once home to the Taino people, an indigenous society with their own rich culture, language, and traditions. They called the island Haiti, meaning land of high mountains, a name that would later become a powerful symbol of resistance and national identity. But the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492 marked the beginning of a slow and devastating transformation. The Spanish colonizers imposed forced labor, leading to the near extinction of the Taino population within a few decades due to overwork, violence, and disease. With the indigenous population decimated, the Spanish turned to African slavery to sustain their growing colonies. Over time, the western part of the island was ceded to France, becoming the colony of Saint-Domingue, what would eventually become Haiti. Under French rule, this small territory became one of the wealthiest colonies in the world, producing sugar, coffee, and indigo on a massive scale. But this wealth came at a horrific cost: the brutal enslavement of hundreds of thousands of Africans. Life on the plantations was nothing short of a death-sentence disease. Malnutrition and relentless work under the Caribbean sun led to staggering mortality rates. The cruelty of the system created an environment ready to explode. By the late 18th century, whispers of revolution began to circulate among the enslaved population. Inspired by the principles of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, fraternity, the enslaved saw a possibility for freedom. Leaders like Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and Henry Christophe would rise from the ranks of the oppressed to lead one of the most successful slave revolts in history. But this story was far from a clean narrative of liberation. The path to freedom was soaked in blood, betrayal, and unimaginable violence. The Haitian Revolution, which began in 1791, didn't just change the course of the island, it shook the entire global order. For the first time, a nation of formerly enslaved people would overthrow their colonial rulers and establish their own independent state. But independence came at a heavy price. France demanded massive reparations in exchange for recognition, plunging Haiti into crippling debt for over a century. The United States and other powers, fearing the influence of a free black nation, isolated Haiti diplomatically and economically. And so, from its very birth, Haiti was cornered, celebrated by the oppressed worldwide, yet treated as a pariah by the global powers. This combination of external pressure and internal struggles planted the seeds for the instability that would plague the nation for centuries to come. The assassinations of leaders, the rise and fall of dictators, and the chaos of foreign interventions were not random events. They were the echoes of a history that began long before independence was declared. Before we dive into those dark chapters, the political betrayals, the violent coups, and the stories the world rarely hears, we need to understand that Haiti's tragedy didn't just start with poverty or gangs. It started with a system designed to break it from the very beginning. And the next part of our journey will take us deeper into those origins, uncovering the shadows behind the official history. Under Louverture's leadership, Haiti emerged as the first post-slavery republic in the modern world. But its independence came at a devastating price. France, humiliated by its loss, demanded an indemnity in exchange for diplomatic recognition, a staggering sum equivalent to billions of dollars today. This so-called debt of independence shackled Haiti's economy for over a century, draining resources that could have built schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, and instead funneling them into the coffers of the very nation that once enslaved them. But Haiti's challenges didn't come solely from external pressures. The young nation was fractured internally. Political rivalries, regional divisions, and competing visions for Haiti's future soon tore at the seams of unity forged during the revolution. Leaders were overthrown, assassinated, or exiled. Coups became alarmingly frequent. The dream of a stable, prosperous Black Republic was repeatedly undermined by both foreign meddling and internal discord. Foreign powers, especially the United States, viewed Haiti with suspicion. A successful slave republic was a threat to the status quo in a world still reliant on slavery. And so Haiti was diplomatically isolated for decades. Trade was restricted, alliances were limited, and the flow of investment was virtually non-existent. This isolation was not just political, it was economic warfare disguised as diplomacy. Meanwhile, the memory of the revolution and the immense human cost it carried created a deep cultural resilience among the Haitian people. Stories of Louverture, Dessalines, and Christophe became part of Haiti's national identity. Legends whispered in markets and sung in folk songs. But this resilience would soon be tested again, as the 19th century unfolded with wave after wave of political instability. By the mid-1800s, Haiti had already seen multiple rulers fall to violence. Some were ambitious reformers undone by rivals. Others were ruthless dictators overthrown by popular uprisings. The line between hero and tyrant blurred, and power was often seized at gunpoint rather than earned through consensus. This pattern of instability would define much of Haiti as history and plant the seeds for the dark events that still haunt the country today. The French, unlike the Spanish and nearby colonies, were less concerned with religious conversion and more obsessed with extracting every ounce of value from the land. This meant a relentless focus on sugar production, an enterprise that at the time was as lucrative as gold. To fuel this economic engine, they imported enslaved Africans in staggering numbers, creating a society where the enslaved population outnumbered the free by a ratio of almost 10 to 1. Life for these men, women, and children was a constant dance with death. The work was backbreaking, the climate unforgiving, and the punishments unimaginably brutal. A slave who fell ill or could no longer work was often left to die. And yet, in the midst of this cruelty, something was stirring a spirit of resistance that no whip could extinguish. This resistance was not just physical, but cultural. Despite the French attempting to strip them of their identity, enslaved Africans preserved elements of their languages, religions, and traditions. Vodou, often demonized by colonial authorities, became a unifying force, a spiritual lifeline, and a coded form of communication. In hushed ceremonies deep in the forests, away from the prying eyes of the masters, stories of liberation and vengeance were shared. These gatherings weren't just rituals. They were the seeds of revolution. But beneath this cultural resilience lay a deeper tension. The colony's wealth made it the envy of Europe, yet it was also a powder keg, ready to explode. Every year, new shipments of enslaved Africans arrived, each carrying fresh memories of freedom from across the Atlantic. They brought with them not only skills and traditions, but also knowledge of warfare skills that, in time, would turn the tide against their oppressors. And then, there was the other layer of conflict, one less spoken about in the grand narratives of history. The free people of color, many of mixed race, occupied a precarious middle ground. They were neither fully embraced by the white elite, nor subjected to the same brutal labor as the enslaved masses. Many were educated, wealthy, and owned property, including, ironically, slaves themselves. This group would become both allies and rivals in the struggles to come, their loyalties shifting as political winds changed. By the late 18th century, whispers of revolution from across the ocean began to reach the shores of Saint-Domingue. The American Revolution had shown that a colony could break free from its European master. The French Revolution, with its rallying cry of liberty, equality, fraternity, ignited debates that would prove dangerous in a society built entirely on inequality. What no one could predict was that these ideas, once planted, would spread like wildfire, and that the most brutal colony in the Caribbean was about to become the stage for the most successful slave revolt in human history. The years following independence were a paradox for Haiti. On one hand, the nation had achieved what no other enslaved population in history had: complete liberation from their colonizers. On the other hand, this victory came with an almost unbearable cost. France, humiliated and determined to make an example out of Haiti, demanded an indemnity so massive it would cripple the nation for generations. In 1825, under the threat of a military invasion, Haiti agreed to pay the equivalent of billions in today's dollars to compensate French slave owners for their lost property. Property that, in this twisted logic, referred to human lives. This debt wasn't just financial, it was psychological. It forced Haiti into a cycle of poverty and dependency, preventing the young nation from building the infrastructure it desperately needed. Instead of investing in schools, ports, and roads, Haiti's resources flowed straight into the pockets of its former oppressors. Banks in France, and later in the United States, profited immensely, while the Haitian people paid the price. The political landscape in the 19th century was just as turbulent. Leaders came and went, often through violent coups. Assassinations, betrayals, and shifting alliances became a recurring pattern. The very ideals of liberty and equality that had fueled the revolution began to erode under the weight of political greed. Power was no longer about serving the people. It was about survival. But perhaps the most dangerous enemy Haiti faced was not an external power or a single corrupt leader. It was instability itself. Each new regime feared being overthrown just as much as it sought to rule. This constant state of political paranoia created an environment where no long-term vision could take root. Roads remained unpaved, literacy rates stagnated, and the gap between the ruling elite and the struggling masses only grew wider. Meanwhile, the outside world, still deeply uncomfortable with the idea of a free Black Republic, kept Haiti isolated. Trade was limited, investments were rare, and the nation was painted in foreign media as a place of chaos and savagery. These narratives weren't just lies. They were weapons, shaping how the world perceived Haiti and justifying its exclusion from global economic systems. And yet, despite this isolation and hardship, the Haitian spirit remained unbroken. Communities relied on one another, traditions were preserved, and the memory of the revolution lived on as a reminder that the impossible had already been achieved once before. But the storm clouds of the 20th century were beginning to gather, and Haiti's journey was about to take an even darker turn. Haiti's past is not simply a chain of random events. It is a web of decisions, betrayals, resistance, and hope, a nation born from fire, yet constantly tested by forces both foreign and domestic. From the moment it declared independence, Haiti became both a symbol of liberation and a target of retaliation. And as we've seen, the seeds planted in its earliest years would grow into challenges that continue to shape the country today. But history doesn't stop here. If you think Haiti's origins were turbulent, the next chapter will take you into an even more gripping part of its story: the political assassinations that shook the nation to its core. These were moments that didn't just change leaders. They changed the course of Haiti's destiny forever. So if you want to understand the full picture, the dark forces, the betrayals, and the deadly power struggles, you want to miss the next episode, The Assassinations That Shook Haiti. Before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Haiti's early history surprised you the most? Do you think the nation's struggles were inevitable? Or could they have been avoided? Share your opinions in the comments. I read every single one. And if you found value in this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to GPT Archives, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Trust me, this is only the beginning.